Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ryan Retro channel. Sometimes in your life it might feel like the cards are stacked against you. But when you're here at the Ryan Retro channel, they're always in your favor. This is the absolutely minuscule GKD Pocket 3, which is smaller than a deck of cards. It fits inside the box of one very easily. It's almost a perfect fit actually. And not only is it small, but the build quality is incredible with a metal chassis and a really classy design. Not only that, but we can actually play a lot of games on here. So let's dive into this and see what it can do. Today's video is going to be my first real review on this channel. So I'm going to adopt a traffic light system where the green lights are things I like about the product, the yellow light is what I think could be improved a little bit, and the red light is what I just don't like about it. So being the positive guy that I am, let's kick it off with the green lights. And I think the first one is incredibly obvious, which is just how tiny this thing is, which means you can easily bring it anywhere you go, throwing it in even a small pocket. Let's compare it with a few other devices you may have seen on my channel, just to give you some real perspective on how small this thing is. The biggest device I have is the Steam Deck, and when we compare it here, you'll see they are clearly in a very different category. So all of those "just get a Steam Deck" comments are not really going to be applicable here. It almost fits just in this side compartment between the screen and the end of the body. It is a very stark difference, and obviously these are very different use cases. So let's now find a handheld that's a bit smaller. My next biggest handheld is the Odin 2 Portal, which is a really lovely little handheld. And once again, very different size, very different use case, because this is a lot more powerful. So let's get smaller again. Here is the Retroid Pocket 5, the bread and butter of this channel, the one that I use all the time, and I made a video taking this traveling because it is indeed small and portable enough to go traveling with. Once again, you can fit maybe 1, 2, 3 of these in the size of this. So if you do want something small and portable, this is definitely going to win in terms of portability again. So what's smaller than the Retroid Pocket 5? Of course, the Retroid Pocket Mini, which I will be reviewing soon on this channel, so keep an eye out for that. And once again, you can pretty much fit this in the screen of the Retroid Pocket Mini almost perfectly. Let's get slightly smaller now and get out our GBA. The Anbernic RG34XX, another product I really like, and once again, this is pretty much the size of the screen. So let's get smaller one more time, and let's compare this to what is probably its closest competitor, at least in terms of the devices I have, and that is my beloved TrimUI Brick. It's very small, very portable, so much so that I take this with me almost every single day. This is the one that always goes in my pocket. But once again, you can see here, it absolutely dwarfs the Pixel. This thing is seriously small. And that to me is the first obvious excellent feature of the product. It's just so small and so portable. And what goes hand in hand beautifully with that is, as I mentioned before, the rock solid metal construction. This thing is built like a tank. And out of all the handhelds I have, this is the one that feels the best constructed. If you saw my review video of the TrimUI Brick, you might have seen me gushing over this little metal back section here, which just looks and feels so premium. Well, the Pixel's whole body is made of that similar material. So really excellent build quality here. And one more feature you get with that sturdy metal construction and boxy shape is you can actually stand it upright, which is something I've been using quite a lot lately. When I write some scripts or work on something, by standing it upright, instead of taking this much of a footprint on my desk, it only takes this much space, which is just so fantastic for maximizing your workspace, and also makes it so easy to just pick up, play, and put down again. You can even do it with one hand, which is another green light for me. This is a truly one-hand capable device. Of course, many games you're going to need two hands to use the face buttons and the D-pad at the same time, but games that do work with one hand, like turn-based games, are going to work so well here using just one hand as you're walking down the street or maybe holding an umbrella. It just opens up so many possibilities. We have a USB-C port for charging here, and it charges very quickly. The battery on this is actually pretty impressive. I didn't do any extensive battery tests, but over the week or so I've been using it, I've been impressed with the battery. And right next to that USB charging port, we also have a speaker, which sounds surprisingly good. It gets pretty loud, as you can hear, and it's also nice and clear. The screen is also excellent, and probably my favorite thing about the whole device. It's very sharp and clear. And one thing I really like about this screen is that it goes very bright and very dark. Here is the maximum brightness, which is very bright and easily visible out in the sun. And the minimum brightness is very, very dark. I can barely even see that on the camera, but this is perfect when you're playing at nighttime. So now how does it actually perform in games? Well, here is a Mega Drive game, Sonic 2, the first gaming memory I ever have in my life, so one I always want to try. And as you can see, it is running beautifully here. This is obviously a very old game and not that difficult to run, but it is nice to see it running so well on such a tiny little device. If we quit out to the main menu here, I can show you some of the systems that it comes with here. There are a lot of arcade games included when you purchase the device. Things like MAME, Final Burn Neo, these are all arcade collections. Old Atari systems. We have Japan exclusives like the WonderSwan, Pico 8, the PC Engine, so many varied systems from the 80s and 90s. Ones that everyone will be familiar with like the NES, the SNES, the Game Boy Color, the Virtual Boy, N64, Nintendo DS, the Game Gear, the Dreamcast. There are just so many systems here. The 3D systems like the Dreamcast, the PS1 and the PSP are the ones that are really going to be testing the limits of this device and really pushing it to the edge. A lot of the 3D games don't really run that well on here. This is more of a 2D device. I'll show you some examples now because I always want to push these devices to their absolute limit. So this is Crazy Taxi on the Dreamcast and it's running a little bit slow. It's not really running at its perfect full speed, but it is playable. I actually brought this to work with me a few days ago because it's so easy to throw into a pocket, and my coworker was in love with this. He played a lot of Crazy Taxi growing up and he was really enjoying the experience. And when I said to him, oh yeah, you know, it's a little bit slow compared to the original, he didn't care at all. Maybe he's just not as obsessed with the tinkering to get perfect performance as I am, but he was having a blast playing this. I've taken a few devices to work now and he said that out of all of the ones he's seen, this is the one he would be interested in because it's just so tiny. And I really think this device has that kind of cool factor to it that people who maybe even aren't considering buying a gaming device would be into. So as you can see, Dreamcast is running pretty well, but not perfectly. And I would not pick this up if Dreamcast was your goal. It's more of just a nice little bonus. We also have PS1 included on here, and it comes with a few PS1 games like the original Tomb Raider, Tekken 3, and Crash Bandicoot. They have put a nice little library of games together on here. I'm going to jump into this game of Grand Theft Auto 1, which I cannot remember if it came with or I added it myself. This game's running pretty well on here. It's running better than the Dreamcast. The graphics are a lot less flashy than the Dreamcast, so it runs a lot easier. And being able to play Grand Theft Auto on something that fits into the palm of my hand is just like a childhood dream coming true. This is definitely one of the most impressive systems we're able to run here. But if you would like to take it up a notch from here, we do also have PSP emulation. I found that with simple turn-based games like this Yu-Gi-Oh game here, we are able to increase the rendering resolution. So I've turned it up to 2 times the native PSP resolution, which I find gives us nice clear text and everything looks really great on this screen. And if I end my turn so you can see the enemy's animations, it's really clear and sharp. It looks wonderful on here. And this is the kind of game that if there were any slowdowns, it wouldn't actually matter. Here we are in Wipeout Pulse. This is a game that came with the device and it's actually my first time playing it. I was a big fan of Wipeout growing up, so I'm really excited to get into this one. We're still at that 2 times resolution, which looks really sharp on here, but it does seem to be slowing down a little bit. So I'm going to create a game configuration just for this game, and I'm going to go back down to 1 times resolution. But it still feels a little bit slow. So this game might just not be perfectly smoothly playable here on the Pixel 2. But those are the systems that are really pushing the limits of the device. Once we go down to older systems like the Game Boys, the Game Boy Advances, this is where this thing shines. And I think just by looking at the style of the device itself, that is the main use case. It comes with a huge library of Game Boy games. You could just be playing these for years on end. So let me run through a couple of games I'm really enjoying on this device. This is Tennis World, a game I absolutely loved growing up. And for the first time ever, I'm getting into RetroArch bezels and color palettes. This Pixel 2 comes with quite a few bezels built in. So if you go into the RetroArch menu here, go to On-Screen Overlay and then Overlay Preset, there are a lot of presets built in here. So we can choose this Game Boy overlay, and you'll see here it has this battery indicator here at the bottom. And on the other side, it says dot matrix with stereo sound. I'm pretty sure this is from the original DMG Game Boy. I didn't have that one, I had the Game Boy Color. So I'm going to come back into Overlay Preset and change that to the Game Boy Color overlay. This time around, we have this power indicator here, which is similar to the battery one on the previous version. And over here it says Game Boy Color, which brings back so many memories for me. But obviously right now this is not in color. So how can we colorize this? Well, we can come back into the RetroArch menu by pressing that dedicated menu key on the side, come down to Core Options, and here we have Game Boy Colorization. There are a few options here. One is the Super Game Boy, which is actually my favorite here. I think this just pops and looks fantastic. But we can also set this to Internal, and then under the Internal palette, there is just a ton of presets here we can go through. We have DMG to make it look like the original Game Boy that came out in the 80s. Look at that, that is nostalgia right there. And we have so many other colors we can go through. One that I'm really liking is SGB1A. It has a kind of orange and yellow, almost sepia tone to it. I really like how it's just kind of a beige brown. I really like this, it looks so retro. So when I play this game, I'm flipping between this look and this look. I think they both look fantastic. And this game runs so well on here. This is what this was made for. Yes! Mario looks impressed. We can hold select and press the right trigger here to just throw down a save file, and then at any point I can just jump back into that game in a matter of seconds. Here is also my favorites, where I can jump into some of my favorite games I've been playing lately, and let me show you now my favorite game of all on this device. And that is Pokemon Gold. A game I absolutely adored growing up, and I feel so much nostalgia with this opening logo screen, the little bezels on the side which make it feel more like a real Game Boy. I am in love with this. And if I use the combination of select and the left trigger this time to load my saved state, the colors here are just so beautiful on this screen. Back when Pokemon games were really simple, you just had a health bar which was green, orange or red, and your HP bar in blue, and that's pretty much all the color you got except the Pokemon themselves. The screen is still mostly black and white with just small classy splashes of color. I think this looks so good. We can also assign these little triggers here to hotkeys. So I have one I can hold to speed up the game. You'll see the little fast forward icon here. Or I can hold select and push it in, which will toggle fast forward mode on or off, so I don't need to hold it down. This is just a beautiful experience. And this game makes this device worth it for me alone. So what I'll often do is I'll jump into a fight like this, and then if I get busy needing to do something on my computer or my phone, I'll just stick the device down like that, and then at any time I can just pick it up, carry on playing, put it down again, and it's just so simple, not even having to find a place to lie it down, just plopping it down like that, and it's so solid. And we can of course also hit the power button here and it will go into standby mode, and I find the battery lasts really long that way. Then whenever you want to play again, tap that power button again, and you're back in the game. So those are all the green lights I have about this thing, but what about the yellow and red lights? Because nothing is perfect. So let's jump into those yellow lights now, the so-so things. The things I think could be improved if they release a Pixel 3 in the future. And the most obvious one to me first of all is the use case for this. I love playing Pokemon Gold on this, I love playing my tennis game and other Game Boy games on this, but it's never going to be my A device. It's always going to be B or C. What I mean by that is this is never going to be my only handheld. If you're really into these handhelds like I am and you want to play loads of games from your childhood, while this can play Game Boy and NES games and loads of those old arcade retro games, the fact that it struggles with 3D games like Dreamcast and PSP is quite limiting. And I mean, look, I understand it's absolutely tiny and it's also quite cheap as well, so you can't expect the world out of it. But if you do want to play those games, you're then going to need something like the Retroid Pocket 5, and you're going to need 2 devices. I'm personally really happy doing that, but it's definitely a yellow light for me, that this can never really be your main primary device, unless you only want to play games that are pretty old. And the next yellow light is going to be the buttons. The buttons are fine, they're not terrible by any means, but they're also not that great. The D-pad is okay, I quite like it. If you move it quickly though, it doesn't feel very accurate. The face buttons are also very spongy. They feel pretty cheap and not that nice to use. The volume buttons are also pretty hard to press. I find that if I just try to quickly turn up the volume, I kind of have to pivot my finger around to try and find a good place to press it down, because it's quite flush to the body and it's just quite tricky to get a good contact with the button. And you're not even able to just hold the button to turn up the volume. You have to actually keep pressing it over and over again. So if I want to quickly turn down the volume, I can't hold the button. I have to press it 10 or 20 times. Thankfully, we have other shortcuts we can use, so we can hold the select button and then press up or down on the D-pad. Once again, we cannot hold it, we have to press it repeatedly, but the D-pad feels a lot better than these buttons, so it's the preferred way to do it. The power button is also quite tricky to find and press, but that one makes sense to me as you're not going to want to press the power button by accident. But probably the most bizarre thing about the buttons on this are that the select, start, and menu button are clicky and feel excellent to me. These are the ones that probably are the least important feeling, yet somehow they feel the best. So I hope with an upcoming GKD Pixel 3 they can put a little bit more focus into the face buttons rather than these buttons. And then lastly we have the triggers, which are just clicky buttons and they feel pretty decent. I find L2 and R2 quite tricky to press just because of their position and the fact they're so small, but most of the systems you're going to play on this device don't use these anyway. They're usually for RetroArch hotkeys, so that's fine with me. This is not a red light. I don't think the controls are terrible, I just think they could definitely be improved. The next yellow light I'd like to talk about is the lack of Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on here. There is a network settings option inside Emulation Station, which we can use for things like scraping box art or using NetPlay to play with other people on RetroArch, which would be so cool on here. But unfortunately, there's no built-in Wi-Fi. That may be to do with things like interference from having a metal chassis, but it would be nice if they could find a way to include it. I did see reports online of people using Wi-Fi dongles connected up to USB-C adapters in order to add Wi-Fi to this. But unfortunately, in all of my testing, I could not get this to work. I even bought the same one other people said is working, but for me, it just doesn't. I also tried various different dongles, but nothing would work. So whenever I open a system on here and see no artwork whatsoever, I just wish I had a way of scraping it on the device itself. But once again, it's not the end of the world because you can scrape it manually on a computer and then transfer the box art over. That's just something that would be nice to have. Another yellow light I'd like to talk about is the color of the screen. I find it has a kind of color cast. When compared to other devices I have, they all seem pretty similar in terms of the color profile and warmth of the screen, whereas the Pixel looks a little bit off. You can see the orange here looks kind of yellow. And I felt in many games that everything just looked a little bit different to how I remembered it. There may be a way of changing this somewhere that I just haven't found, and if there is, I would really like to do that, because right now it just feels a little bit different. But once again, if you're not comparing them side by side, and you're not using lots of different handhelds all the time, you probably wouldn't even notice. And the final yellow light I have is I just wish this was touchscreen. I'm sure that would increase the price by quite a bit, and it might not even be very useful with the games that are available. But there are so many times when I've been walking down the street holding this in my hand, and it's just the absolute perfect size to play some kind of touchscreen game. It kind of reminds me of that Rabbit R1 AI disaster piece that came out a few months ago. I've been regularly taking it to work, and on the way to work I've been holding it in my hand, playing one-player turn-based games like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh games. I just wish it was possible to have a game like Pokemon Go on here, and be walking along flicking Pokeballs at Pokemon. Because it's so small, you can very comfortably wrap your fingers around it and just use the screen. But unfortunately we don't have a touchscreen in here, everything is controlled by the buttons. But if an Android version of this came out in the future with this same form factor, that would be amazing. So those are my yellow lights about this device, the things I think could be improved. Now what are the red lights? Well, when I take into consideration the size of the device, the price of the device, I only actually have one red light. And very confusingly for this concept, it's actually a green light. Because on the side of the device here, we have these green LEDs. The GKD Pixel 2 has these green battery LED indicators on the side of the device, which show how much battery you have left. And I just have no idea why they did this. Because the device already has a battery indicator on the screen anyway, and those LEDs cannot be turned off and cannot be dimmed at all. They are just on full brightness all the time, which I found very distracting. Here is a video of me using the Pixel in bed. I'm in the pitch black, so the screen is nice and dim on the minimum brightness setting, and look how bright and distracting those green lights are. It was shining a big green glow on my wall. So I decided I need to fix this, and I took the whole thing apart. It was at this point that I realized I have no idea what I'm doing, so I then tried to put it back together again and forgot to put the buttons in, which reaffirmed I have no idea what I'm doing. So instead I just grabbed a Sharpie and colored in the translucent plastic that covers the LEDs. And now we have this quite cool looking black cover that actually really blends in well with the power button here. And I'll show you how it looks now once again in the pitch black. There is a tiny little bit of light bleed coming from those LEDs still, but it has pretty much completely mitigated the problem. I could probably get back inside it and put something around the holes to really cover it up, but for me this is good enough, and that eliminates that red light. So as a quick little summary, I'll put my traffic light system back on the screen so you can look back through those green lights, yellow lights, and red light and make a choice about if this is the right device for you or not. And I now also realize I've accidentally created the flag of Mali. So my final conclusion about the GKD Pixel 2 is it is excellent. I really like this device a lot, and it has been my most used device since I got it. This was provided to me by 2Retro, who also gave me this lovely little cleaning cloth, so check out their website if you'd like to buy one for yourself. I have an affiliate link in the description where you can get 10% off. And while 2Retro provided this device for me, they in no way told me I have to say it's good or anything like that, because they sell tons of products. So check out their website where you can buy this handheld or loads of others, and use my code ryanretro to get 10% off your order. If you follow the affiliate link in the description, it will automatically put that code and apply that 10% discount for you. So thank you everybody so much for watching this video. Thank you 2Retro for sending me a genuinely fantastic handheld that I love. Thank you so much to all my Patreons who continue to support my channel, and I'll see you all very shortly for another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.